All right, today we're jumping into a big one. IRS Form 1040NR. This is the tax return specifically for non-resident aliens. I know, it can look pretty intimidating at first glance. So our mission today is super simple. We are going to demystify that essential taxpayer information section right at the very top, one line at a time.
Look, if you're feeling overwhelmed by this form, trust me, you are not alone. It's a complex document, and it feels like almost every single line points you to a separate page of instructions. But don't worry, we're going to focus on the fundamentals, and by the end of this, you'll have a really solid foundation for an accurate return.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with who actually needs to file this thing. Then we'll cover your tax year, which ID number you should be using, your filing status options, which are different, and how to declare assets and dependents. Let's dive in. So first things first, who is this form for? Well, it's designed for non-resident aliens who have income from U.S. sources. For tax purposes, that's generally anyone who isn't a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. And here's the most important part. If that sounds like you generally cannot use the standard Form 1040. The 1040NR is your specific designated return. Okay, the very first choice you have to make right at the top of the form is defining your tax year. Now, it seems really simple, right? But believe it or not, this is a little detail where people often trip up. You've got two basic options, a calendar year or a fiscal year. Now, the IRS is very specific about what a fiscal year is. A calendar year always ends on December 31st. Easy. But a fiscal year can end on the last day of any other month. It's a really critical distinction to make because choosing the wrong one can actually lead to penalties. All right, once you've set your tax year, you need to tell the IRS who you are. And for most people, filing a 1040NR, this is not going to be a Social Security number. It's a totally different kind of ID. And that ID is the ITIN, which stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. You can think of it as your way of telling the IRS, hey, I have a U.S. tax obligation, but I'm not eligible for a Social Security number. You get one by applying with Form W-7, and for the vast majority of 1040NR filers, this is the number you're going to put on that line. But, and this is a really critical rule, if you are eligible for a Social Security number, you must use it. Don't go applying for an ITIN. Using the wrong number can cause major processing delays and a whole bunch of other headaches. Besides, if you have an SSN, you're almost certainly filing the standard Form 1040, not this 1040NR. Okay, next up is your filing status. Now, if you've ever seen a standard Form 1040, you're going to notice something right away. The options on the 1040NR are a lot more limited. As you can see, you can file a single, married filing separately, or in some specific cases, qualified surviving spouse. But what's missing is just as important as what's there. The two really big ones, married filing jointly and head of household, they're just not available. So why is that? Well, it's because those statuses are tied to U.S. residency, which comes with the requirement to report your worldwide income, something non-residents generally don't have to do. So what does this actually mean in the real world? Honestly, it's a huge deal. The married filing jointly status almost always gives you lower tax rates and more deductions. But since that's not an option here, a non-resident couple has to file two separate returns. And that usually results in a much higher combined tax bill. It's a major financial difference. All right, let's look at two more key declarations right there at the top of the form. Digital assets and dependents. They might just seem like simple little questions, but the answers can have some really important implications down the line. Here's a perfect sign of the times, right? The digital assets question. It's a simple yes or no checkbox asking if you dealt with things like cryptocurrency or NFTs. Now, you might be thinking, if I check yes, does that mean I automatically owe more tax? Not necessarily. But what it does is signal to the IRS that you have transactions they're going to be looking for somewhere else on your return. So you have to report them correctly. And when it comes to dependents, it's basically a two-step process. First, you list their name and their ITIN on the main 1040NR form. But that's just step one. To see if you actually get any financial benefit, like the child tax credit, you have to fill out a whole separate form, Schedule 8812. And I've got to say, claiming a dependent as a non-resident is actually pretty rare and has very, very strict rules. Generally, for you to qualify, the dependent has to be a resident of Canada or Mexico. So, let's recap. We've walked through the tax year, your ID number, filing status, and these other key declarations. It might all seem like pretty basic information, but getting these first few lines exactly right is absolutely fundamental to your entire return. Think of it like building a house. If your foundation is cracked or shaky,
the whole structure is at risk. It's the same thing here. A small error in this top section can create problems that ripple through your entire return, messing up your calculations and just slowing everything down. So precision from the very start, that's the key.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Those first few lines on any important document, whether it's a contract, an application, or a tax form, they really do set the stage for everything that follows. So how might paying just a little bit more attention to those initial details change the way you approach complex paperwork in other parts of your life? It's a good reminder that, more often than not, the beginning really does shape the end.